The publication of Prince Harry's tell-all memoir, Spare, has left many wondering whether there is any hope for a reconciliation between the Duke of Sussex and his family. Following the countless revelations, it has been questioned whether the prince's unflinching honesty and insight into life behind palace walls will have a lasting impact on the British monarchy. However, it has since been argued that the Duke's book has had the opposite effect, overshadowing and taking attention away from the deeper problem within the House of Windsor, one that could spell disaster for an age-old outfit. Clive Irving, author of The Last Queen and royal columnist at the Daily Beast, claimed the memoir is not in any way a threat to the royal family. He said, "In fact, I think the reverse. I think the book served to cover up what is really a much deeper problem for the whole family." Appearing on an episode of the Royally Obsessed podcast last week, Mr. Irving pondered how long the British monarchy might have in an ever-changing, ever-modernizing Britain. They're increasingly out of sync with what's going on in the country, and the mood of the country, and this particularly is a problem for the king. Standing over the precipice of an unknown future, King Charles III has been monarch for just over 5 months, having ascended the throne in September following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The late Queen, who inherited the throne in 1953, was 25 at the time of her accession. Charles was 73. "What you see is a fairly old man," Mr. Irving said. In fact, Charles, at one point, said no one should be monarch after the age of 70. Has inherited this huge apparatus of the monarchy, all these palaces on the model that the Queen set for herself and couldn't be changed as long as the Queen was alive, because it seemed part of her and she was very, very popular. Charles is almost standing over the edge of the precipice, looking down to a completely unknown future for both the monarchy and the country. The 8 controversial details of King Charles' coronation that risk public backlash. King Charles' coronation will take place on May 6, but the event has already become the subject of controversy. From the cost of the day to the invitations of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, Express. Co.uk rounds up 8 controversial details of the occasion. Given his age, Charles has been described as a transitional monarch, holding the top position between the lengthy reign of his mother and the accession of his eldest son, Prince William. In the years before Queen Elizabeth's death, polling suggested that British citizens preferred the idea of William becoming king instead of Charles. A YouGov poll laid in May found that the former Duke of Cambridge was the favourite to succeed the Queen. Another poll found that only 32% of Britons thought Charles would do a good job as king, comparatively low to the 77% who said William would do a good job. The king's biographer has urged people not to underestimate him and the impact he may have. Speaking on an episode of podcast Royal in November, Christopher Anderson said, "I think one mistake people make is to assume he, Charles, is going to be a placeholder for William, that he's going to keep the throne warm as it were. He's going to be an activist and he's going to leave his mark on history. He has waited so long for this moment. Edward VII waited 59 years, but Charles has waited 70 years. Mr. Irving, however, argued the king is yet to establish himself, saying the uncertainty surrounding the monarchy's future is all coming to a head with the approach of the coronation. He added, "I don't think Charles knows what he's doing." Medieval hangover. The coronation of King Charles is set to take place on May 6 at Westminster Abbey. Though many of its components will mirror the crowning ceremony of Queen Elizabeth, significant changes have been made to reflect an evolved society. Dr. Bob Morris, a constitutional expert, told Express. Co.uk, "It's simply a reflection of the sort of country we have become. We have changed a lot over the last 70 years, and I think Charles accepts that must be reflected in the nature of the coronation." Similarly, Mr. Irving said Britain is different in every possible way today compared to 1953 when the Queen's coronation took place. She was very young, age 25, and she was very much the apprentice, inexperienced. "The ceremony was medieval," he said. He continued, "It's true that a third of people believed a sovereign was appointed by God in 1953, and it was an institution presented on television for the first time through the coronation. It was essentially a medieval hangover, and it reflected the times of a country that no longer exists." Charles's coronation, which is set to be a smaller and shorter affair, and will come as Britain tackles a cost of living crisis. For Mr. Irving, the danger is, the coronation will seem like a banquet being performed, while thousands are suffering after a severe winter and amid very high inflation. He said, "The amount of money given to run the monarchy has gone from £13 million to £86 million, so there is an enormous inequity and disparity between the level of life lived by a king and ordinary citizens." The author went on to note the increasing use of food banks, which last year saw demand surge yet donations fall. His comments came shortly after Kate, Princess of Wales, and Prince William paid a visit to a Windsor food share late last month, garnering criticism from some who deemed the trip insensitive. Plutocratic bubble. The Prince and Princess of Wales visited the food bank to learn more about its work and help volunteers sort food donations and packages for clients to collect later. Both Kate and William were seen handling some of the food items and talking to volunteers. Following the royal visit, the food bank tweeted, "We had the pleasure of the company of the Prince and Princess of Wales today. They came to visit the volunteers, to hear about what we do at Windsor Food Share and to help volunteer. They really are welcome back anytime, as they were most certainly a help, not a hindrance." Yet, the couple was accused of being part of a publicity stunt, with social media calling out the royals for using the food bank for a photo op, including one Twitter user who said, "How do they not realize how offensive and insensitive this is? Multimillionaires funded by the public visiting a food bank. It's obscene." Another added, "Worth noting that while Kate and William brought an army of PR types, photographers, security, etc. to the Windsor Food Bank, they didn't actually bring any actual food." Graham Smith, the CEO of the anti-monarchy group Republic, told The National, "These visits are little more than PR for the royals. They're aware of how bad their extravagant lifestyles look during a cost of living crisis. Now they want us to believe they're rolling up their sleeves for food bank charities." A brief trip round the corner from one of their palatial homes smacks of cynicism, not genuine concern. Mr. Irving, too, described behavior which he suggested leaves a foul taste in the mouths of normal people. He said King Charles' lifestyle is plutocratic, comparing it to that of the late Queen, who never seemed to be a plutocrat despite her riches. He explained, "She didn't live like a plutocrat. Whereas, Charles lives inside this plutocratic bubble in a big country house, with an extravagant lifestyle and very petulant behavior about all the things that he needs every day, from the toothbrush in the morning to the bath at night." Charles was reportedly nicknamed the Pampered Prince by his staff at Clarence House, and details of his lavish lifestyle were revealed in the 2015 Amazon Prime documentary, Serving the Royals, inside the firm. Paul Burrell, who served as a butler to the late Queen and Diana, Princess of Wales, claimed the King's staff are given particular instructions when tasked with caring for him, from ironing his shoelaces to putting toothpaste on his toothbrush. The former butler said the King had everything done for him, adding, "His pajamas are pressed every morning, his shoelaces are pressed flat with an iron, the bath plug has to be in a certain position, and the water temperature has to be just tepid, in a bathtub filled only half full." Charles even has his valets squeeze 1 inch of toothpaste onto his toothbrush every morning, according to Mr. Burrell. Charles's greatest threat. Both Dr. Morris and Mr. Irving pointed out the abundance of information the public has about Charles' life as an additional problem for the King, comparing it to the late Queen's mystique and ability to be completely unknowable. Charles to break silence on Harry and Meghan in Christmas speech with no hidden messages. King Charles III will break Buckingham Palace's silence on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle during his first ever Christmas speech, royal sources have claimed. The royal household has remained tight-lipped on the couple since their Netflix docuseries came out. What could the King say in the speech? Find out more here. Mr. Irving said, "Charles is completely known and we know every sordid detail of his background, the pluses and the minuses. And so the people will see that too. I don't think anyone in Britain at the moment even notices the existence of the King because they're too busy getting on with and dealing with their own lives, and the King isn't doing anything to make himself relevant to that." Similarly, Katie Nicholl, author of The New Royals, recounted interviewing constitutional historian Dr. Anna Whitelock, who identified the greatest threat to Charles' reign. She said, "The King has got the issue of keeping the United Kingdom united, which is really enormous and very, very important to him. I spoke to a very good constitutional historian, Dr. Anna Whitelock, and she said to me that she believed the greatest threat to Charles' reign was apathy and that people just simply wouldn't care." Charles also faces the challenge of maintaining support outside of the country. Several Commonwealth nations have indicated that there is an increased desire to separate themselves from the monarchy, with Republican sentiment reportedly bubbling in some areas, accelerated by the death of the Queen. Bubbling Republican sentiment. It has long been said that the Commonwealth realms within the Caribbean are intent on cutting constitutional ties with Britain. Now, reports suggest that Australia may also be re-examining its royal affiliation. Charles's portrait will not feature on the new Australian $5 banknote, as the late Queen's currently does. Instead, the new bill will honour the country's indigenous culture and history. The King's face will still appear on coins. Dr. Morris said, Republican sentiment, is alive and well in a lot of places. There was a failed referendum in Australia in 1999 and I imagine the Australians will have another go at that. And indeed, I think the present government has said it, although it is not on the front burner as it were, is something that would naturally come forward when the Queen died. Cindy McCreary, a historian specialising in the royal family at Sydney University, recently told Express.co.uk that, amid the fallout surrounding the Duke of Sussex's book Revelations, Australians are turning their backs on the monarchy. Moreover, a new poll suggested there has been a rise in Republican sentiment since the publication of Spare, with some participants admitting to being influenced by Harry and his wife Meghan Markle's recent claims. The survey, conducted by Resolve Strategic for the Sydney Morning Herald, found over 1/5, 21%, said the claims had had an impact on their view. with 14% saying they were now more likely to support a republic. 7% said they were less likely to do so. When asked whether he thought King Charles is up to the task of addressing the royal family's past role in colonialism and slavery, Mr. Irving said, "I don't think he's got that message. And in fact, I think the people around him, the courtiers who are very powerful in this situation, the people who run the machine on a daily basis, are a generation who don't believe in the concept of reparations." He continued, "I think it was a big shock when William and Kate went to the Caribbean and suddenly started hearing the word reparations." However, Russell Myers, royal editor at the Daily Mirror, argued that there is huge support for the monarchy in places like Australia and New Zealand, rubbishing the idea that the countries want to part ways with their royal histories. Speaking on last week's episode of Pod Save the Queen, he recalled personal conversations he had with the King during his 2021 visit to Barbados for the Republican handover ceremony. Charles reportedly told Mr. Myers, "We're not here to be rulers. We're here to be partners." Mr. Myers continued, "I think that's a really important point moving forward because the King does not want to stand in any of those countries' way if they want to choose their own destiny. And that is going to shape, I imagine, a large part of his reign because will it be a domino effect? Once one goes will the others go?" Although, he went on to acknowledge that we are in a different world now the Queen is no longer with us, saying, "It's Charles' reign." Does he represent the same values as the late Queen did for such an incredible legacy that she carved out and left behind? It will be very difficult to have that argument. Queen Elizabeth died at the age of 96 after a 70-year reign, and with her death came the end of an era, and as Mr. Irving explained, the Queen was a second part of an age. The first age began with Winston Churchill. It could be called the age of heroic survival through the Second World War, and Churchill more or less wrote the script for that afterwards, so as long as he was alive, he was the symbol of that spirit. When Churchill died, there was enormous outpouring, and the Queen inherited the mantle of that age. She continued it in all the ways that she related to her people. She was really a reflection of that period of her destiny. That period may have come to an end with her death. There were very few people left who had a memorable experience of the early Churchill era, Mr. Irving said. And so, history very seldom ends neatly with like a bookend. But I think the Queen's death was a book and it closed an age, leaving Charles, the inheritor, with a huge problem.